Hello, this will be a preview. I'm doing a deep dive into the Serapeum and checking all the sorts of, claim of a lost ancient high technology. It's impossible to get these boxes inside there. There's like literally not enough room to get in there. That you need 46 billion oxen to move the boxes there on the inside, and their precision, they're precise, they're flat, they've got perfect 90 degrees. I'll be going through all of these very detailed fine-tooth comb. But just as a preview, firstly, you can get the boxes in there. They're not precise, etc. I've done a previous video on the claims of precision, etc. But I'll be going into all these other details now. How did they get them down into the lowered niches? All of those questions. There's a lot of great evidence that's actually just sitting there at the Serapeum itself, which gives all the clues. Look at historic examples of moving heavy stones from ancient depictions. Masons and quarrymen, the photos and films of them doing this type of work with primitive technology, with wood and rope. All of those will be answered, and again, some great evidence that's literally sitting there in the Serapeum. You can fit them all in, you can get them all in. There's not a problem in that regards. They're not flat, they're not precise, but just as a, again, preview, Serapeum box weight. Now, there on the bottom on the right, you have a Wikipedia entry, some weighing up to 70 tons, including the lid. But then more and more we're getting that there are 100 tons combined, some weigh 100 tons. Now, you might say, well, what's the difference between 70 and 100 tons? Was about 30 tons difference in there, and that's an important. So if okay. Now, for instance, here we see coffer 26, which is in a corridor, and top right corner you see object 27, which is a lid, and they're, given the size and its location, that's almost certainly the lid for coffer 26. But included in the video where I go for all these features, I'll be using specially Sherif channel. Great footage from Egypt. He's Egyptian, so he goes, he gets got access, and he does a great tour of a Serapeum. It's a one-shot, non-stop, just walking tour, and shows it all the way through. We're using that as the basis for these videos. But there you can see him screenshot top left corner, and he seems to be a tallish fella, so let's say about 6 foot high. There from his hand you get a gauge of the height of that box there in itself. So there we see a comparison of the other box, so of the larger one. So that one's on the smaller side, and does have that wooden floor built around it, but we'll go into all these in a deep dive. But just as a beginning, let's look at the height of that box. So using that gauge, it's 6 foot high, 1.84 meters. Width, give a little bit more, say 6.5 foot, 1.9 meters, and the length is, couldn't determine it for sure, but the boxes tend to be less than a 2-to-1 ratio, so they're not double the length according to the width. So so I'm going to be, what I've lost from the floor because of the wooden floor there, I'm adding to it in length and saying it's twice as long as it is twice as long as it is high. So this is being very generous in that sense. So whatever I lost in the height, I'm more than making up for in the length, saying that it's 12 foot long. So if we use those measurements, we get an external volume 1.84 times 1.98 times 3.68, or 13.4 cubic meters, but it's hollow, so we need to take that away. And again, being generous, 1.52 times 1.3 times 3 meters, or 5.928 cubic meters, which gives us 7.5 cubic meters of grey granite. And this is a grey granite box, and the box itself will affect it because basalt tends to be heavier, and different granites weigh different levels as well. So just pulling up some the stats on different rocks and minerals. But so granite is between 2.52 to 2.81 tons, metric tons, 1,000 kilos per cubic meter. So we'll use the large number, and probably because it's grey granite it should go less, but let's say 2.8. And so 7.5 cubic meters times 2.8 gives us a weight of close to, maybe a fraction above, maybe a fraction more, but 21 tons. Don't be in, when you hear tons, people, like anything above 1 ton is now, you can't move it. You need advanced technology to move it. No, when I'll show you examples of old-fashioned tech, people moving much, much bigger weights with sticks and string, like ropes and logs. So it's not a problem. We'll come to that in the full video. But again, when you hear this, it's the 100 tons, 100 million tons, you need 6,000 oxen on steroids to get this. You can't move it. We'll go through all of that, but yes, you can. And these weights, I worked in lifting and rigging. This is not impressive in terms of weight. Just by anyway, if you're in the trade, if you worked in the trade, that's not going to freak you out. All right, so, but how much do the larger coffers weigh? This is number 17 in niche 17. I've chosen this one firstly because we have a really big lid. Pardon? The lid is really large. The box itself is very large, and because it's cyanite porphyria, it's heavier than what granite is. Okay, so we have the dimensions there. Is it 100 tons with the lid? Well, this is from the Isida project. Sarcophagus 17, cyanite porphyry, 3.8 by 2.17 by 2.3 meters. I've just rounded up to 2.2. I'm always going to be generous in this regard as well. All right, so we can now work out the external volume of the coffer. That 2.2 times 2.3 times 3.8, so I have 19.3 cubic meters. The box is hollow. They didn't have the thickness of the wall, so we had to do a little bit of exploration. So I've just extended these lines to get an idea of the inside walls, and then added a gauge there, so where the thickness of the wall comes in. And the thickness of the wall seems to be half of the width of the internals. Okay, so 55 centimeters, 2.2 meters, so 1/4 about 55 centimeters. This is a photo from coffer 6. Again, one of those very large, on the more impressive side, larger box. But we see the wall thickness there. You see the project, and that's 40 centimeters. So not only is coffer 17 large with a large box, but also it has thicker walls than what the others there. And we'll go through each box in detail and challenging, precision. Anyway. So that's the reason why I chose this particular box. So 1.1 times 1.8 times 2.7 to get an internal volume. 5.3 cubic meters. We take that away from the external volume. We get 14 cubic meters of cyanite, and that's 2.6 to 2.9 tons per cubic meter, metric tons, 1,000 kilos. So again, we'll use the largest number of 2.9, and the weight of this box is not 70 tons, it's 40.6 tons. So this is, and that's being generous. Now, again, the difference between 70 tons and 40 tons is 30 tons. It's not a small amount, and even it's basically double the box, the weight of the earlier box I showed. And when it comes to ancient materials and techniques, and even examples in the age of film and photography of old school masons moving and quarrymen moving these types of things, that is not an impressive number. We'll go through it in detail later. But anyway, we have the lid. So the lid has the same base, but it is 1 meter high. So it's easy to work out the volume. 1 times 2.2 times 3.8, so it's 8.36 cubic meters. Cyanite porphyry, and that's 24.24 tons, being very generous because I'm not taking account for the bevel. That might be at least 1 ton, maybe 2 off there. But what we have is a combined weight of lid and coffer of just say 65 tons, and again being on the generous side as well. So that's 35 tons different from the 100 tons, and much closer to what most reasonable sources come to this would say up to 70 tons. So it's no small thing to add 35 tons, but let's look like Sennacherib from around 700 BC shows a moving of a giant lamassu. You can even maybe see, like especially on the top right corner, you can see those lamassu, that winged lion, and they've got some giant ones in there. But what we have is, and I'll also show you some Egyptian examples of them moving heavy stones. But top left, you can see how it's being moved out of the quarry. So you can see them walking up a steep hill, and on the other side you can see people moving rubble out. But again, they're using the same method, and it's a more detailed drawing, but we see they're using a lever and a sled. Now, bottom right is a part of a relief. I think it's relief 63, but the top right, you get a close-up of there. And what you see, again, they're using levers. They're bringing rails from the front, placing them at the front, from the back, and then placing it at the front. So just like almost like a train, as the sled goes along, you just put wooden blocks down, grease them up, and it just slides across. I'll show you examples of filmed examples of them doing exactly this in the 1930s to move a 300-ton block across incredibly difficult terrain. So, well, you can see there in the bottom, give me a lever long enough, I'll give a place to set it, I shall move the earth. So again, using examples like this and moving equivalent stones on wooden rollers as well. Now, also look at the it's just physics. What it's well known what the power of a lever is. There's online calculators to do it, and look at other details like inertia and friction and stuff. But the fact is that firstly, these Serapeum boxes are being grossly exaggerated by the lost ancient high technologists. There's some ones who say you can't get it inside. This can't be done. They're exactly precise and precision and all this stuff. But, well, okay, we'll do a long detailed one. But it's this is they're off by by being off by 35 tons is. This is not the worst. This is the closest they've got to being anywhere sort of near to reliable, truthful, diligent in these types of things as well. So when you hear it's 100 tons, well, no, it's not. It's 2/3 of that, but even that's so. What they describe as being just the coffer itself being 70 tons is more than what the combined weight of the coffer and the lid is together. And of course, you don't move them together. What you do is you move them separately. So what the heaviest coffer will be about 40 tons, and the lid is, well, even less than 24 tons. So you only got to move one and you got to move the other, and this is perfectly doable. And again, filmed and photographed examples of equivalent or much greater work being done, as well as a historical record of from the ancients showing us how they did it. So back in the black and white days, they were using lost ancient high technology to move these things, and they weren't just, for instance, on the rollers there on the bottom, they weren't just, it wasn't a straight line from the quarry. They had to go down twisting roads, and when they finally got to the location, they had to hook it in and then drop it in the location. So there's absolutely nothing in that Serapeum that not only possible but entirely feasible, given the fact that it was done in the past and was the way that these things were done. They were moving big giant stones early in the 20th and in the late 1800s, a lot more than what they do now. We don't work with we've got these massive machines, we just don't work with big stones the way that, you look at all the old monuments, the old big stone churches, the old big stone buildings, none of them are modern. We just don't do it no more. They did it back in the old days with ancient tech, levers, wood, rope, and just good old-fashioned hard work, and they were doing exactly then what people were doing in the megalith builders were doing in the ancient times as well. All right, so that's the preview. Again, that's stage and high technology just doesn't, they get it wrong in one direction when it suits them. They seem, they can fail in an experiment when they want to prove one point, but when they go in the other, everything works in their direction. Everything works in their direction. It's either it's too heavy when it's less, and you can't do it because it takes too long or something like that when it comes to, non-existent experiments as well. There's a couple of alleged experiments, but they're just fake, and it's, anyway, that's what's to come. Thought I'd throw a video out there, and yeah, have a good one.